I think that as we look out to 2025, 2026, we will basically see three phases of ups and downs. Between now and the middle of the year, we will have a very large correction in global equity, bond, and commodity markets. This will force the Fed and other central banks to ease monetary policy, produce a form of QE, and rates will start falling. That will result in a resurgence of inflation, particularly energy and food prices. The dollar will start falling sharply. With inflation rising, equity and commodity markets will surge to new highs by the end of 2025. But at the same time, the long end of the interest rate curve, which central banks cannot control, will be rising. The yields will be rising very sharply. For instance, we have 10-year treasuries yielding well over 10%. That will result in the highly leveraged parts of the global economy basically going bust, which will lead us into the coming depression. I think there is an additional factor that we have to add to the fragility of the global economic and financial structure, and that is the war syndrome. The war has been perceived by markets as something way out, far away from America, doesn't concern us, etc., etc. But the war is going to, probably by the middle of this year, is going to take on a completely different posture, which is basically, whether you call it World War III, I'm not sure, though in my gut, it's saying it's going to be World War III, because what's at stake for Russia is the security of its borders, which NATO members ever since 1991 have failed to keep their promises. And it's particularly relevant for Russia in an age of hypersonic technology, whereby probably within 2 to 3 years, America will have mastered that technology and will be in a position to locate hypersonic missiles close to Russia's borders, which would enable them to hit the big cities within 3 to 4 minutes. For America, what is at stake is really the breaking up of the growing alliance that was taking place between Germany, Russia, and China. Had that progressed, it would have led to the three countries controlling Eurasia, which, if you go back to 1904, to Halford Mackinder's treatise, he who controls the heartland, which is Eurasia, controls the world. So the first part of what's been taking place from America's point of view is the breakup of that alliance, which they've successfully done. Basically, it threatens America's hegemony, would threaten the domination of the US dollar. So you've got your two sides deeply entrenched. Russia, because of the security of its borders, and America, the dollar hegemony. Because what's happening elsewhere in the world, the large part of the world has got fed up by being told what to do by America. And what you're seeing is the enlargement of BRICS Plus. I believe today Egypt has formally announced that they have joined BRICS Plus. We know that from both public statements and private conversations that the countries in the Gulf are going to join it. We know, for instance, that Saudi Arabia has sold some oil to China, which China paid for in RMB. And with those RMB, Saudi Arabia bought gold, probably on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Mm-hmm. So in my view, that was a test case. Does it work? And the answer is probably yes. I think gold is very central to the BRICS Plus equation. I mean, as to give another example, the trade between Russia and China is growing exponentially, with Russia holding a large trade surplus. That trade surplus is held in a gold differential account with the PBOC. So what the Russian economist who is running the financial side of BRICS Plus, developing their new trade and currency platforms, what's now going to happen is that member countries can trade within themselves or even externally eventually on a currency that's based on 20 commodities that they produce, but valued not in US dollars, but in grams of gold. So you can see actually that when it comes to the Gulf countries, the same formula that China and Russia have formulated will probably be used when the Gulf countries make the decision, which will be a step-by-step approach to ditch the dollar and to use their trade other currencies than the dollar. Probably not other fiat currencies, and probably it will be, as Russia is holding a trade surplus in a gold differential account at the PBOC, so the same will probably happen with the Gulf countries. I think there is, not immediately, but over the next couple of years, I think there's a real risk that we'll have a change of government in Germany, that German industrialists will have a larger say in the formation of policy, and that where do they see growth over the next 10, 20 years? Not westwards, but eastwards. And I think you can well see that Germany will rebuild that alliance with Russia and China, depending, of course, on how the war ends. And then you have to ask the question, does that then mean that they join BRICS Plus? America's just negotiated 4 additional military bases in the Philippines. I hear that America is deploying more troops to Japan and Guam. There is this continuous encirclement. You've got one of the top Pentagon guys now in Taipei, or on his way there. You had the other day the American embassy in Moscow advising all Americans to leave Russia. You had today Putin's annual speech saying that we are temporarily withdrawing from the New START treaty and that we have placed ground-based strategic missiles, nuclear weapons on combat duty. It's all hotting up. Whether it's going to lead to anything, who knows? But it's that all one can say is the tensions are going to increase. That's going to have a huge impact on monetary policy. You go from QT to QE in some form or another. Interest rates will start falling. Inflation then takes off. Energy prices you probably see some further supply disruptions, plus the fact that OPEC is no longer going to do the bidding of America and Europe, but will follow policies that reflect the real supply-demand situation. Plus, we're bound to get some supply disruptions. So we have oil prices this year probably at 150 before the end of the year, and between 150 and 200 next year. Food prices will also be soaring, not only because of the war, but because of weather patterns. In particular, there is a risk that either this year or next year, that the 89-year Glesberg cycle hits again. And 89 years ago, it caused the American Midwest Dust Bowl decade. So there are many reasons for seeing that the drop in inflation is very transitory, and that by the time we get into 2025, probably the US CPI, despite all the manipulations that are and have been taking place, will probably be higher than the 1980 peak of 13.5%.